There are days when a courtroom feels less like a room and more like a mirror that forces everyone inside it to face who they really are. Days when the law stops being an idea written on paper and becomes something alive, something that refuses to bend for power, wealth, or anyone who believes they stand above accountability. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to see how far this conversation is reaching. It began on a quiet Monday afternoon, the kind Judge Frank Caprio had lived through thousands of times, the kind where parking tickets, minor disputes, and everyday conflicts pass through his courtroom like a gentle stream. But then the door opened, and the atmosphere shifted. A woman entered dressed as though she were stepping into a federal hearing, rather than a municipal courtroom. Her suit was immaculate, her jewelry subtle but unmistakably expensive. She carried a leather portfolio embossed with the seal of the United States District Court. Every step radiated the message she wanted the world to read: authority, power, untouchable. Her name was Catherine Morgan, the spouse of Federal District Court Judge Richard Morgan. She carried herself with the posture of someone who had rehearsed this moment, someone certain the law would move aside for her. The clerk's voice cut through the room. The state of Rhode Island versus Catherine Ann Morgan. Judge Caprio studied her with calm concentration. He had seen arrogance before, but this was different. Her confidence felt almost ceremonial, as though she believed just standing in front of him established her superiority. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, "how do you plead?" She lifted her chin, her voice firm and practiced. "Not guilty, Your Honor, and I object to these proceedings. This court lacks jurisdiction over me." The room rustled with confusion. Caprio leaned forward. "Explain your objection." Her tone suggested she was teaching a first-year law student something embarrassingly basic. "My husband is a federal judge appointed under Article 3 of the Constitution. Federal judges and their families have constitutional protections that supersede state jurisdiction. This case should not be heard here." A quiet ripple moved through the courtroom. A few eyebrows rose. Others stared at her as though they had misheard her entirely. There was something chilling in her certainty. Caprio asked, "Are you saying that being married to a federal judge gives you legal protection from state prosecution?" She nodded with absolute conviction. "It provides jurisdictional protection. Federal families are not subjected to state criminal proceedings. It is a matter of separation of powers." Caprio exhaled softly, absorbing the weight of her claim. At that moment, the victim stood with effort. James Chen, 71 years old, a Vietnam veteran who had walked into a spa 5 days earlier seeking pain relief for old service-related injuries. What happened instead left him shaken, physically hurt, and deeply disrespected. He wore a simple veteran's cap, a quiet symbol of a life shaped by sacrifice. Caprio thanked him for attending, then asked Catherine gently, "Do you recognize the harm done to Mr. Chen?" Her voice remained cold. "Your Honor, the incident has context, but the jurisdictional matter needs resolution first. Federal judicial privilege takes precedence." Privilege. The word hung in the air like a stain. The assistant district attorney requested that security footage be reviewed. The lights dimmed slightly as a monitor flickered on. The room watched as the events replayed. There were no graphic moments, but what unfolded was disturbing in another way. An adult using fear, status, and aggression to intimidate someone older who had done nothing to provoke it. The camera captured raised voices, invasive gestures, intimidation, and a level of entitlement that made several spectators shift uncomfortably in their seats. When the video stopped, silence swallowed the room. Catherine cleared her throat softly. "Your Honor, the footage lacks context. I felt unsafe. Spa staff did not handle the situation appropriately." Caprio looked at her with measured restraint. "Mrs. Morgan, he was moving away from you." She straightened, unfazed. "None of that changes the fact that this court does not have the authority to prosecute me." Officer Sarah Martinez took the stand next. She described the scene she arrived to. Staff helping Mr. Chen, Catherine refusing to provide identification, and repeated declarations that she was immune from arrest because of her husband's federal position. "What specifically did she say?" Caprio asked. Officer Martinez recalled the statement carefully and without embellishment. "She told me she did not answer to local police, and that attempting to arrest her violated the Constitution." Catherine did not flinch. In fact, she reached into her leather portfolio with slow ceremony and withdrew a laminated identification card bearing federal seals. "This," she said proudly, "is my federal judicial dependent identification card. Immediate family of Article 3 judges are protected from state interference. The Constitution demands that." Caprio examined the card. Building access, nothing more, nothing less. "Mrs. Morgan, this does not grant legal immunity." She smiled politely, as though correcting a student who made an innocent mistake. "Your Honor, with respect, you may not be familiar with federal judiciary practices." There was a sharp inhale somewhere in the gallery. The judge sat silently for a moment, the kind of silence that arrives only when truth is about to be separated from illusion. Then he spoke. "Clerk," he said, "I need 2 phone calls. Contact the Office of the Chief Justice of the United States and contact the Federal Judicial Ethics Office." For the first time, Catherine's gaze flickered. The calls connected through speakerphone, their voices filling the courtroom. Senior counsel from the Supreme Court, Director of the Federal Judicial Ethics Office. Caprio explained the situation. Catherine's claims, her assertions of constitutional immunity, her use of a federal courthouse ID as supposed proof. A heavy pause followed. Then Senior Counsel Park spoke. "Your Honor, there is absolutely no constitutional protection for spouses of federal judges regarding criminal prosecution. None." Director Ellen Walsh added firmly, "What Mrs. Morgan is claiming is not a misunderstanding. It is a complete fabrication. If Judge Morgan taught this to his family or allowed them to believe it, that is grounds for immediate ethics investigation." Catherine's composure broke. Her breath hitched. She opened her mouth to speak, but Caprio raised a hand. "Do not interrupt." Director Walsh continued. "We are dispatching ethics investigators immediately, and we have contacted the United States Marshals Service. Claiming federal authority to obstruct local law enforcement is a federal offense." When the call ended, the room felt carved out of stone. 20 minutes later, the doors opened. 2 U.S. Marshals and 2 ethics investigators stepped inside. Their presence was quiet, but definitive. "Mrs. Morgan," Deputy Marshal Rodriguez said, "you are under arrest for obstruction of justice and false representation of federal authority." Her voice shook. "My husband will fix this. He is a federal judge." The marshal responded quietly, "He is being interviewed right now. This will not be fixed by power." The courtroom watched as she was escorted out. Her confidence dissolved into something fragile and frightened. News spread within hours. A federal judge's spouse arrested. A federal judge suspended pending investigation. A judiciary shaken by the realization that one of its own had allowed his family to believe they were above the law. 2 weeks later, Judge Morgan resigned rather than face impeachment. Catherine pled guilty in both state and federal court. Her sentence focused on accountability and corrective action rather than humiliation. Several months in federal custody, years of probation, and hundreds of hours serving veteran organizations. The first day she reported for community service, she found James Chen waiting, not out of anger, but because he wanted to look her in the eyes and remind her of something the courtroom could not teach. She approached him slowly. "Mr. Chen," she said quietly, "I caused harm. I acted with entitlement. I used my husband's position as a shield, and I was wrong." He studied her for a long moment. "Mrs. Morgan," he said gently, "respect is earned through how we treat people, not through who we marry. There is no privilege in this world that excuses harming others. The uniform I wore never made me superior. It taught me humility. That is the lesson." She nodded, tears gathering, and somewhere in a municipal courtroom in Providence, Judge Caprio's words lingered. "The law does not bend for invented privilege. Not today, not ever." If this story moved you, make sure you subscribe, share your thoughts, and let us know what kind of powerful courtroom moments you want to explore next.